Thank you all for coming. My name is John Stang. I'm a senior history major here at Roanoke. And this is my summer scholars project. And it's about Volga-German immigration to a barn. The first thing I think to do is kind of define who the Volga-Germans are. Who are these people and where do they come from? Well, Volga-Germans are a group of people, a group of Germans who come from the various Germanic states. Bavaria is one of the biggest places that they come from. And around 1764, Tsar Catharine the Great of Russia asked them to come and farm land along the Volga River. This is kind of in the southeastern part of Russia, because there's a lot of fertile farmland there, and it was recently required by the Russians during the war. And they would have a couple of benefits for doing this. The first is they wouldn't have to serve in the Russian military, which was about a 25-year sentence if you did that. The second is that they didn't have to pay taxes on the land, and they would also have all their transportation costs paid for. So it was a pretty good deal for the German immigrants. And this was open to not just German immigrants, I should say. It was open to a lot of groups around Europe, but Germans were the ones who really responded to this call. When they came to the Volga, a lot of them continued to kind of settle by religious group. You have Catholics, you have Lutherans, you have Mennonites, Seventh-day Adventists, who are kind of settling in these little farming colonies. And the dominant language of this group is still going to be German. They're there for about, a lot of them are there for about a good century, and they really don't learn a lot of Russian. They only learn enough Russian to speak to the civil authorities that they have to talk to, and they mostly kind of communicate and work amongst themselves. Like I said, this lasts for until about 1874, when Tsar Alexander II officially declares that the privileges that they were offered are revoked. They have to start serving in the Russian army. They have to start paying taxes on the land. There's also some religious persecution that happens as well. And so they are forced to leave Russia, or they decide to leave. Where they decide to settle is partially in places where there's a lot of really good farmland. The Midwestern United States, a lot of them go to Canada. You'll see a small group of them will go to Argentina. There's actually still a community there today. Some of them just stay there because they don't have the economic means to leave. You have to sell a lot of your assets to be able to make this journey, and some go back to Germany. So this is kind of the story that we're working with here. This is the background of these Volga-German immigrants. And the specific community that I decided to look at was Catharine, Kansas. To kind of give you a sense of where that is in Kansas, you can see on your left is a picture of Kansas. And the red dot is Ellis County. It's in the kind of central western part of the state. And there's a blown up picture to your right of Ellis County. And I'm not sure, I think you guys can probably see Catharine on that map. But there's also some other towns you might be able to see there as well. There's Gorham, there's Walker. These are all kind of Volga-German settlements. They're Catholic Volga-German settlements. Hayes, which is in bold there, is the biggest city. It's about 10 minutes away from Catharine. It's this kind of Wild West folklore that goes with Hayes, Kansas, but it's not very far from Catharine. So that gives you kind of a sense of where this is, and the community that I'm talking about is where they're located. So to kind of talk a little bit about Catharine, Kansas, and exactly the history of this town, this specific group of immigrants leaves in the winter of 1875, and they stay part of their winter in Topeka, Kansas. They then move to Hayes and go and spend part of the spring there, and then around March, April, they move out to Catharine. They build their houses primarily out of sod at first, and then they will use limestone, which is in a quarry kind of nearby that they can build houses with. They establish family farms, farms that they can pass down from generation to generation. They will continue to speak German in these towns primarily. They will learn some English, like they learn some Russian, but German will be the primary language that they'll pick up. They will also build institutions. They'll build a school in 1879. They'll build a post office in 1880. they'll build a church in 1890 and a store in 1891. So they'll build all the necessary amenities to have a town, to have a culture, if you will. The most interesting part of Catharine, I think, is how Catholic this town is. A lot of these Volga-German immigrants have a Catholic heritage. There is not a church there. They don't have a church actually for the first 20 years. What they have is kind of makeshift services that they'll have out of a settler's house, led by a local schoolmaster at first. Or they'll go out to a field near a processional cross that they make, and they'll have services there. Now they can't distribute sacraments, but they will have some type of a service. Eventually they'll have a group of Capuchin priests that will come from Pittsburgh that speak German that will distribute the sacraments, that will start to preach to the town. They'll also have a group of sisters, the Sisters of St. Agnes from Wisconsin, who will come and teach the children of the town. They were German speaking, so it was very easy. It was easy for some of them to be able to relate and be able to teach the necessary subjects. They aren't able to build the church until 1890, but as you can see, that when they do build the church, it's just this marvelous, it just stands out in the town. It's this limestone building. When you go inside, this is a picture I took on your left from the choir loft, and they're just gorgeous on the inside when you see these places. They're just magnificent. But these are the institutions that make up a good majority of the town. The next part of the project was tracing not just the 19th century part, but looking into the 20th century. Analyzing when Catharine started to change. When did it stop being this kind of ethnic German settlement based on a common language and turn into just a small farming community? Just turn into this regular small town. So to kind of get an idea of when this town maybe started to break up, when it started to change, I looked at federal census numbers to get a sense of population. This is a chart that has these federal census numbers. It begins in 1880 with about 244 people. 1890 it goes up to 311, and so on and so forth. You go down, of course, to 1940, they have their largest population at 775. And then 1960, it drops to 537. It then drops again to 381 in 1960. So between that 20-year period, there's a change in the town. People are starting to leave. A lot of events happen, but I wanted to know exactly what caused this shift to occur. So to achieve that goal, I conducted several interviews. I interviewed people who were in their late 70s to their late 90s, the oldest person being 98, to try and get a sense of what happened, what changed in this town. I interviewed people of different occupations, so 2 farmers who owned family farms, 6 Catholic sisters. I traveled to Fond du Lac, Wisconsin to interview some of the Sisters of St. Agnes, some who taught, and also some who left Catharine to become sisters. There's about 40 sisters in total that are from Catharine. So it's a pretty impressive number. Also 2 oil workers. Oil's discovered in 1926 in Ellis County, so this was an option for some people. And then 1 farmer's wife who did not grow up on a farm herself, but she did marry a farmer and would move on a family farm. And I learned that they left for various reasons, mainly jobs, whether it's serving in the military during World War II or Korea, or whether it's working in the oil business. For other people, it could be entering religious life. That could be men could join the Capuchin priest order, and a lot did. Or a lot of women would join the Sisters of St. Agnes because they saw a chance for upward mobility there. They could become teachers, they could become nurses, a lot of them could get a college education. There was also a girls' Catholic school in Hayes that a lot of them could go to. And so this was a very popular option for a lot of women and a lot of men to join the priesthood. And then the final reason I think a lot of them ended up staying was because of family farms. Usually you had 1 or 2 men that would kind of run the farm, that would keep the farm together. And this was a very important component to Catharine's history, to what it needs to accomplish. The final portion of the project is just talking about Catharine today, understanding what keeps this town together. And what I determined was the institutions, the common history is what keeps it together. There's still a post office there, and where a lot of people get their mail. The church is still open, where you can go to Mass every Sunday at 9 a.m. The school and store are no longer there, but but the family farms that are being passed down from generation to generation are still there. And all of these things are what binds this history. It's this living history that is literally there that keeps this town together. And even though German is no longer the common language anymore, that common history is still what I think is very important, and the legacy of this 19th century town. Just finally, I want to just thank a couple people for this project. Dr. John Selby, who's sitting back there, my advisor, my parents, Dr. Lyon in the Summer Scholars Program. Most importantly, I want to thank my grandma, who is 91 years old. She lives in Great Bend, where I grew up, and she's from Catharine. She would always tell stories of this town, and it was just, and we would travel there sometimes for family events, and I always found it to be just very exciting. I wanted to tell a story about this Volga-German community and about the Volga-Germans in general. So with that, I look forward to, I guess, any questions you guys might have.
I actually have two questions. One is, when did they largely give up speaking German? I mean, when did the sort of linguistic component of the community kind of decline?
That's a very good question. I determined that it was roughly between 1945 and 1950.
Okay.
There's kind of two reasons for that. The one reason, of course, is anti-German sentiment during
Right.
World War II. Another one, I think, more importantly, is just in general assimilation. A lot of these kids, when they go to school, did not speak English. They're thrown into this classroom, and the sisters forced them to speak English. That would only get better when they started going to high school in Hayes, or some of them would go to high school in Hayes anyway. And as a result, a lot of them didn't necessarily pass on German to their kids. And so because of that, you don't really get that linguistic trend.
So do you think, is this a sort of conscious effort on the part of this community to assimilate and to become American, and part of what that means is sort of giving up the German language, do you think?
Yeah, I would say so. I think that's part of it. I think assimilation has a bigger role to play than like anti-German sentiment, for instance, because they're out in the countryside, they're isolated. You don't really get a lot of those things when you're out in an isolated community. So I think that it's more of a conscious effort to try and become more American as the community develops.
My other question had to do with sort of the degree of anti-German sentiment in sort of the, around the time of World War I and then again World War II. I mean, were there sort of obvious acts of anti-German sentiment in this community, do you think, or not?
Weirdly enough, I don't think so. I didn't really come across any obvious examples. Now, Kansas does pass certain laws that ban teaching the German language in schools and using it in talking about German in textbooks. So that does exist, but I don't really see it affecting this town or this community that much, which when I thought going in was going to be a really big component to it, but it just doesn't seem to be a big driver for whatever reason. Any other questions? All right.